The night my husband broke his arm, I thought the worst thing I'd face was a long wait in the emergency room. I was wrong. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. Machines beeped in uneven rhythms, while strangers whispered prayers into their phones. My husband, Mark, lay on the gurney, grimacing but still trying to joke. "Guess I won't be lifting anything for a while," he said with a weak smile. I squeezed his uninjured hand and tried to laugh, but something felt off. Not fear, tension, the kind that sits in your chest without a reason. A nurse came in to adjust his IV. She was young, professional, calm, too calm. As she checked his vitals, her eyes flicked to the hallway, then back to me. "Are you his wife?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said. She nodded and finished her work. As she turned to leave, she brushed past me, then stopped. "Oh," she said casually, slipping something into my palm. "You dropped this." I looked down. It was a folded piece of paper. Before I could ask anything, she was gone. I unfolded it slowly, my hand shaking for no reason I could explain. 3 words were written in neat, rushed handwriting. "Check the camera." My heart started pounding. I looked up at Mark. He was watching the TV mounted in the corner, completely unaware. The room felt suddenly smaller, quieter, like the air itself was holding its breath. What camera? The hallway? The room? The parking lot? I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket just as Mark turned toward me. "You okay?" he asked. I forced a smile. Just tired, but my mind was racing. Because nurses don't pass secret notes for no reason. And something told me, deep in my gut, that whatever that camera showed was going to change how I saw my husband forever. I didn't check the note right away. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, some mistake, some inside joke I wasn't meant to be part of. But the words burned in my pocket like they were alive. "Check the camera." When Mark was taken for x-rays, I finally had a moment alone. I stepped into the hallway, my heart beating louder with every step. I didn't even know where to start, so I asked the first nurse I saw where the waiting area cameras were. She pointed toward a small security office near the elevators. "I need to see footage from earlier tonight," I said, lowering my voice. "It's about my husband." The security guard hesitated, then shrugged. "Family can request it if there's an incident." An incident. That word made my stomach drop. The screen showed multiple angles. The ambulance bay, the ER entrance, the hallway outside trauma room 3. I leaned closer. And there he was. Mark, but not the version of him I knew. He wasn't injured. He wasn't in pain. He was standing in the ambulance bay, arguing with someone just out of frame. His movements were sharp, angry. Then the camera angle shifted, and my breath caught. A woman stepped into view, young, nervous, wearing scrubs. The same nurse who gave me the note. Mark stepped closer to her. Too close. She backed away. His hand shot out, not hitting her, but grabbing her arm. I gasped and covered my mouth. The footage had no sound, but I didn't need it. Her body language said everything. She twisted away, pointing toward the building, clearly calling for help. Then another nurse appeared. Security followed. The footage jumped. The next clip showed Mark being helped onto a stretcher, clutching his arm like it was broken. My hands started shaking. He had lied about how it happened, about why he was hurt. I backed away from the screen as footsteps echoed. Because someone else had entered the security office, and when I turned around, my heart nearly stopped. It was Mark's brother, and the look on his face told me he already knew exactly what I had just seen. "Don't," Mark's brother said quietly. That was the first word out of his mouth. He stepped into the security office and closed the door behind him, as if he could trap the moment before it exploded. "You shouldn't be watching that," he added. I turned back to the screen, my voice shaking. "You knew." He didn't answer right away. That silence was all the confirmation I needed. "What happened?" I demanded. He ran a hand through his hair. "Mark's been under a lot of stress. He didn't mean anything by it. Things just got out of hand." I laughed, sharp and hollow. "He grabbed her." "That's not how he sees it," his brother said quickly. "He says she misunderstood." I stepped back. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't pull in enough air. That's his version, I said. What's yours? He looked at the floor. I told him to calm down. I told him to walk away. That's when he slipped. That's how a grown man ended up with a broken bone. I left the office without another word. Back in Mark's room, he was awake now, scrolling on his phone. He smiled when he saw me. Easy, familiar, fake. There you are, he said. They're saying I might need surgery. I sat down slowly. How did you break your arm? He didn't look up. I told you I fell. I waited. Nothing. I leaned forward. Mark, there are cameras. His hand froze mid-scroll. For a split second, I saw it. Panic. Then anger. Then control. You went behind my back? He snapped. You embarrassed me. Embarrassed him. Not remorse. Not regret. That was when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. A knock came at the door. The same nurse stood there, her face pale but steady. I need to speak with you, she said, looking directly at Mark. Hospital security has questions. Mark's jaw tightened. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't afraid of the hospital. He was afraid of what I might say next. Because the truth was about to leave the room, and I was the only one who could decide whether to stop it. The room went silent after the nurse spoke. Mark didn't answer her right away. He stared at the wall, jaw clenched, like he was calculating his next move. I had seen that look before, when he was losing control but pretending he wasn't. I didn't do anything wrong, he said finally. This is ridiculous. The nurse didn't react. She simply nodded and turned to me. Ma'am, she said gently, we need to ask you a few questions as well. My heart dropped. Mark's eyes snapped to mine. There was a warning in them now, a silent plea. Be careful. We stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights felt harsh, exposing everything I was trying to hold together. Another officer joined us, tablet in hand. Did you witness how your husband was injured? He asked. I hesitated. Mark's voice cut in sharply. She wasn't there. The officer raised an eyebrow and looked back at me. Is that true? I thought of the camera footage. The nurse pulling away, Mark grabbing her arm. I swallowed. No, I said quietly. I wasn't there. Mark exhaled in relief. Then the officer asked the question I wasn't prepared for. Has your husband ever scared you before? The hallway felt like it was closing in. Mark laughed from behind us. That's crazy. But the nurse didn't laugh. She watched me closely, her eyes steady, like she already knew the answer and just needed me to say it out loud. Images flashed through my mind. Doors slammed too hard. Arguments that ended with silence instead of apologies. The way I'd learned to choose my words carefully. I opened my mouth, and before I could answer, Mark spoke again. His voice low, threatening. Think carefully about what you say next. The officer turned sharply toward him. Sir, he said, that won't be necessary. Mark's face changed, and in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't just about the nurse. And whatever I said next wouldn't just decide what happened to Mark. It would decide whether I was finally ready to admit the truth I'd been hiding from myself. The hallway felt impossibly quiet. Every sound, the distant beeping of monitors, the squeak of a cart rolling past, felt amplified as I stood there, staring at the officer's face. He wasn't rushing me. He wasn't judging. He was waiting. Has your husband ever scared you before? He asked again. Softer this time. Mark shifted behind me. I didn't have to look at him to feel it. The pressure, the expectation, the years of unspoken rules. Protect him. Stay calm. Don't make things worse. I took a breath. Yes, I said. The word came out small, but it landed like thunder. Mark laughed sharply. This is unbelievable. The nurse's jaw tightened. The officer wrote something down without looking up. Can you explain? He asked. I nodded slowly. He's never hit me, but he gets angry. He blocks doors. He yells until I stop arguing. Sometimes he grips my arm too hard. My voice shook. I've learned to stay quiet. Mark exploded. You're twisting everything. The officer stepped between us. Sir, please lower your voice. Mark's face went red. She's emotional. She's tired. She doesn't know what she's saying. But I did. For the first time, I wasn't minimizing it. I wasn't excusing it. Another officer approached and asked Mark to step away. His brother appeared down the hall, panic written all over his face. Just calm down, he whispered to Mark. That's when the nurse spoke again. She wasn't the first, she said quietly. Everyone turned. There was another complaint, the nurse continued. Different woman, different shift. Mark went completely still. My stomach dropped, because suddenly this wasn't just about one moment, one camera, one note. It was bigger. And whatever came next was going to expose a truth Mark had spent years hiding. The air shifted after the nurse spoke. Mark didn't yell this time. He didn't argue. He didn't even move. He just stared at the floor, like a man doing mental math, counting what he could still deny and what was already lost. Another complaint. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. The officer straightened. Can you explain what you mean? He asked the nurse. She nodded. 6 months ago, different patient's wife. Similar behavior. Grabbing. Intimidation. She didn't press charges. She just wanted it documented. I felt sick. I thought about how easily I had convinced myself that Mark's anger was stress, that his temper was temporary, that love meant patience. The officer turned to me. Ma'am, have you ever felt unsafe going home with your husband? Mark looked up sharply. Don't answer that. That was all it took. 2 officers immediately stepped in. One gently but firmly guided Mark backward. Sir, he said, you need to stop speaking. Mark's brother rushed forward. This is getting out of control, he said. He's hurt. He needs surgery. And we'll make sure he gets medical care, the officer replied. But this is now a safety matter. I realized my hands were shaking. Unsafe? I thought of nights I stayed quiet just to keep the peace, of apologies I gave just to end arguments, of how relieved I felt when he was in a good mood, and how tense I was when he wasn't. Yes, I whispered, sometimes. Mark snapped. You're ruining my life. I met his eyes. No, I said. You did. The officers exchanged a look. Then one of them said the words that made my knees weak. Ma'am, we're going to need you to consider protective options tonight. Protective, as in not going home. As in, this was bigger than a hospital incident now. And as Mark was led farther down the hallway, fighting to look calm, he turned back and said something under his breath that chilled me. You think this is over? I knew then it wasn't. Not even close. I didn't go home with my husband that night. Instead, I sat in a small, windowless room near the nurse's station, holding a paper cup of water I hadn't touched. A social worker spoke softly, explaining options: temporary housing, emergency protection, resources I never imagined I'd need. Mark was still in the hospital, under supervision, angry. Every few minutes, my phone buzzed. Texts from him. You've blown this way out of proportion. They put ideas in your head. You owe me an apology. I didn't respond. Then the messages changed. I never meant to hurt you. You know I love you. Come talk to me, please. My chest tightened, not with hope, but with clarity. I could see the cycle now. Anger, denial, guilt, promises, repeat. A police officer came in quietly. He's asking to speak with you. I shook my head immediately. No. The word felt powerful, final. Later, the nurse, the one who slipped me the note, found me again. She sat beside me, keeping a care. I'm sorry you had to see all of that, she said. But I'm glad you did. I looked at her. Why me? She hesitated. Because you looked like someone who still thought this was normal. That broke me. I cried harder than I had all night, not out of fear, but grief. For the years I'd spent explaining away things that should have sent me running. When morning came, I signed papers, statements, forms. My hand shook, but I didn't stop. Mark was discharged under conditions. I left with Rachel. As we drove away, my phone buzzed one last time. A voicemail. His voice was calm, too calm. You think the cameras saved you, he said. They didn't show everything. I stared out the window, heart pounding, because I realized something terrifying. There were parts of my marriage no camera had ever seen. And if he was willing to threaten me now, what would he do when he realized he'd truly lost control? I thought distance would bring peace. It didn't. Rachel let me stay in her guest room, but sleep refused to come. Every sound, a car door, footsteps in the hallway, my phone vibrating, made my heart race. I kept replaying Mark's voicemail in my head. They didn't show everything. What didn't they show? The next morning, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. "Is this Mark's wife?" a woman asked. My stomach tightened. "Yes." She paused. "My name is Lisa. I don't know how else to say this, but I think we need to talk." We met later that day at a quiet park. Lisa looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who had carried a heavy truth for too long. "I was married to Mark before you," she said. My breath caught. Mark had always described her as unstable. Someone who made things up. Lisa swallowed hard. "When I heard about the hospital incident, I knew it wouldn't stop with you." She told me about the broken phones, the holes punched in walls, the way Mark would apologize so convincingly afterward that she began doubting her own memory. "I left when he grabbed me in public," she said. "No one believed me. There were no cameras. I felt sick. He warned me about you," I whispered. "Said you were dramatic." Lisa nodded. "He says that about all of us." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I kept this in case I ever needed proof," she said. I didn't know who I was saving it for. Inside were photos, messages, a handwritten apology from Mark, admitting he had lost control. My hands shook. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a pattern, and for the first time, I understood what Mark meant. The cameras hadn't shown everything, because the worst parts had happened where no one was watching. And now that I had proof from someone else, I had to decide whether I would stay silent like before or finally expose the truth he'd spent years burying. But I wasn't the only one making decisions, because as I returned to Rachel's apartment that night, something was waiting for me at the door. I froze in the hallway. At my feet was a small padded envelope, slid halfway under Rachel's door. No return address. My name, written across the front in handwriting I knew too well. Mark's. Rachel came up behind me. "What is it?" "I don't know," I whispered, but my body already did. I carried it inside like it might explode. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was my old phone, the one I thought I'd lost months ago, the one Mark had helped me look for. Before suggesting I must have misplaced it, taped to the screen was a note. "You should have listened." My stomach dropped. Rachel grabbed the phone. "This is bad," she said. "How did he get in here?" "He didn't," I said slowly. "He knew where I'd be." I turned the phone on. Dozens of unread messages loaded instantly. Messages I had never seen. Drafts I had never written. Conversations sent to people I barely knew. Messages that made me sound paranoid, aggressive, unstable. My chest tightened. "He used my phone," I whispered. "He was building proof. Proof that I was crazy, that I lashed out, that I couldn't be trusted." Then I opened the last folder. Audio files. I pressed play. Mark's voice filled the room, calm, rehearsed. "If anyone ever hears this," he said, "just know I tried to help her." I dropped the phone. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was preparation. Rachel grabbed her keys. "We're going to the police. Now." As we stepped outside, my phone buzzed again, this time from Mark's number. One text. "You still don't see it, do you?" I looked up and felt my blood run cold. Across the street, a car sat idling, headlights off, and in the driver's seat was Mark, watching, waiting. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I stood there, staring at the car across the street, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. Rachel grabbed my arm and pulled me back inside, locking the door behind us. "Police, now," she said. By the time officers arrived, the car was gone. But Mark wasn't, because this time I had proof. Not just fear, not just my word. The old phone, the messages, the recordings, Lisa's evidence, the hospital footage. All of it told the same story, a pattern. The police listened, really listened. A restraining order was issued that night. Mark was warned, documented, and finally seen for who he was behind closed doors. Days later, detectives called. The audio files he created to frame me, they backfired. Metadata, timestamps, his own voice admitting control, manipulation. He thought he was smarter than cameras. He wasn't. Weeks passed, then months. The divorce was quiet, clinical, empty of drama, because the truth had already done the talking. Mark never showed up in person. He sent lawyers, letters, apologies that no longer worked. I moved. New apartment, new locks, new mornings without fear. Sometimes I think about that nurse. How close I came to folding up that note and throwing it away. 3 words saved me. Check the camera. But the camera didn't protect me. The nurse did. Lisa did. Rachel did. And finally, I did. Because the scariest thing I learned wasn't that my husband could hurt someone. It was how long I'd been trained to doubt myself. If you're watching this and something feels off in your life, listen to that feeling. Truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it slips quietly into your hand and waits to see if you're brave enough to look.